I believe that sport reflects society. So when you talk about that kind of
It does.
sexism or what we've grown up with inherently, a lot of that's just what's in society. But sport kind of magnifies that to a great extent because it is this unique cultural thing that it brings us together as communities. We celebrate, we feel all those emotions. It's something that's so powerful. So it has the ability to kind of magnify what we see anyway in society, whether that is around racism or homophobia or sexism or the issues that we see often are just kind of exacerbated through sport. But sport has a great chance to drive change as well by doing it differently to the rest of society.
I actually my brother got married, oh God, you'll not forgive me for this, but maybe 10, 12 years ago. And as often happens at family weddings, there's a bit of alcohol flying around. And my sister, younger sister, we were very close in age, 18 months apart. She got quite upset that evening, and some things came out about when she was younger because there was three boys and my dad, and we were very much, we kind of took over the family. When I reflect, at the time I didn't know, we were just kids, but our family was football on the TV. If it wasn't football, it was rugby. And it was obviously men's football and it was men's rugby. And then if you can't see it, then it's hard to be it. And my sister obviously didn't feel connected to that. Then we were in the other room playing table tennis or playing snooker. And again, probably pretending to be Steve Davis or Stephen Hendry or, the people that we've seen on the TV. And she actually reflects on her childhood, not in such a positive way, which really upsets me to think that she went through that actually without us having any idea. Then I kind of fast forward to now, and I see the excitement that my daughters get from watching the World Cup, and being able to see the Lionesses that then actually transforms into I'm a big Newcastle United fan, so they now really follow Newcastle United as well, and we are all watching the football together, whether that's men's football or that's women's football, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well, and I think it's it's really sad that so many people have gone through and continue to go
Yeah.
through that situation, and people like you bringing it to the forefront does such a good job of making us, I think, all reflect on our own situations and how we can do things better.
That's interesting. I feel for your sister because I had three brothers and my dad was a PTI in the Met Police, a very sporty family. So I had a twin brother though. And I feel actually what I ended up doing was becoming really sporty almost, because of that probably, all that.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily football in our house, but a lot of rugby and other sports on the television all the time. So I do feel for her there. And I think that's really important what you said there, isn't it? It's just about reflecting on where we are with it because I think the more you hear research, there's obviously the extremes in a male audience, and there's the Joey Bartons and the completely negative. Whatever happens, they're going to hate women and women's sport. That's kind of that they're given. And then you've got men at the other end who are huge allies and supporters of. And for me, it's the tranche in the middle that we need to just bring across to women's sport to see how it benefits everyone to be more inclusive, the how great women's sport can be. And I think that's where we're seeing the biggest change is people saying actually it wasn't anything negative on purpose of trying to exclude women. It was just that was how families were, how sport was, as you say. It wasn't, we didn't see women's sport. So I think that's the where we're seeing a lot of that shift really is men recognizing actually, yeah, why should my daughter not have a chance to play? And it's a bit of a trope, isn't it? That whole I'm the father of daughters and therefore I support women's sport. And for some in the industry, that's a bit frustrating because actually you're also the son of a mother and you've often got sisters and people haven't, but suddenly it's having daughters that I think does bring men more awareness of like, oh my God, I've got this daughter and she's going to miss out on all these things that I had.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's bringing someone in the world that makes you recognize actually it's not equal, but you almost as a young man growing up might not have appreciated that.
One of the names I've got written down later, but I want to jump into it now because you've mentioned him, Joey Barton. And not that we necessarily want to give Joey too much airtime, and I'm a big Newcastle United fan, and he played for Newcastle as well. But I had two men written down, Andy Murray, which I definitely will touch on, but then Joy Barton. And my thing I wanted to bring up on Joy Barton, or a like-minded person to Joy Barton, who, like you say, is kind of, he's made his mind up, right? That's how he is. He's very strong. However, I just wonder in my own head, by having the Joy Bartons of the world making these bold comments and crazy comments and stupid comments at times, it does bring an emotion out of not just women, but out of a lot of men as well.
Yeah.
And it brings then to the forefront and more of an awareness and more conversation around it. I don't know what you think on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I do feel it is how, like, much of social media, isn't it? And politics become so polarizing. I don't even know that Joe Barton does believe all the things he posts. I think he's just trying to get more traffic to his social media and his new podcast and all the rest of it as well. So I think a lot of it is he'll find whatever popular opinion is, go against it to try and kind of generate that reaction. But I do agree too. I mean, I really feel for Annie, Luco, and those that have been kind of ahead of all that horrible hatred and vitriol that's come out of the comments that he's made. But it has made us go and have those conversations. And absolutely, there's so many amazing men that have, and actually when he's then moved on from women to start his kind of racist rants and homophobic rants and everything, that actually more and more have come on board as well too, to say absolutely this isn't acceptable. I saw something recently on it, or I heard something on a podcast around there is a bit of a danger when we talk about it as if it's normal. So it's a bit about Andrew Tate, Joe Barton, that whole extremism of men and young men, but actually that isn't the norm. Like, that isn't the norm for most men that I know, and kind of guys in university and young boys coming through school. But actually, if we always talk about it as if that is acceptable and the norm, then will others begin to adopt that behavior? And actually, if we could make more noise, if we could have more Premiership footballers and coaches and others coming out and supporting women's teams, women's sport, then actually your human nature is to align yourself with what popular culture is saying. And actually we probably need more men, because you said we will mention Andy Murray. I talk a lot about Andy Murray in the book and on podcasts, etc., but he's one of very few, and it's a long time ago. He's constantly been an amazing male ally for women's sport, but why am I still talking about him when I'd like to have another 100 men to talk about? But it's like Ian Wright, Ugo Monye, Andy Murray, like they're few and far between. But actually, how amazing would it be if that was just the norm and everybody spoke out in the way that he did?
And I think that's a really fair point, and I think it's a point I hope we all take on as well, because I go to Andy, and Andy's someone I actually grew up playing against. I have a few years on him, but at the end of my playing career was the start of his playing career. And I've always massively looked up to Andy because he's a British player who has achieved so much on the world stage with tennis. Tennis is my thing. It's my passion. It's what I've done. But where I've actually learned to look up to Andy even more in recent times is the fact that he's got these words out there, and he's got this brought awareness to this issue. And I would say definitely personally, when I talk about subtle sexism, I think, he's had a few, and I'm sure you've talked about it, but, Novak Djokovic has won the most ever Grand Slams. Well, no, he hasn't. Serena Williams and Margaret Court have won more, or this, whenever, these little things that journalists talk about. But the point that I want to bring up on Andy, because I asked him about this when he was on the podcast, and a lot of people think it's from Judy, and Judy's amazing, and is such a massive advocate and for empowering women in sport, whether that's coaches or players. But he actually said it was Amelie Mauresmo, and it was his experience of having a female coach with him, where he almost couldn't believe what he was hearing and seeing, and reactions that were happening towards Amelie. And he actually went on and he said, when I lose a tennis match, normally nobody mentions my coach. And then here they are, everyone's talking about Amelie Mauresmo, and it must be her fault. And he even said that, people in his team were questioning it, which they would not question that if that was Ivan Lendl, or if that was a world #1 male tennis player. But I guess that the bit that it gets me reflecting on, Sue, is it's really hard to have strong opinion and to it takes a lot of understanding, empathy, to have such a strong understanding of people's lives that you don't live and don't feel.
Yeah.
And it almost seemed to me that Andy's strength in this area came from actually having this personal experience with a female coach. And you've mentioned there a lot of fathers say it around having daughters, because all of a sudden it's in their world. So how do we get it into people's world? And this is not just about equality from sexism. This is obviously there's a whole diverse range of things that this fits into. How are we able to do that without people actually personally experiencing it?
Yeah, and it's hard, isn't it, as well? Because I do feel there's an element of that kind of pushback then against what people might term as woke. I would class as being kind and compassionate and inclusive. I'm very happy to be all of those things. But there is a bit of a pushback because people feel it's being forced upon them. And that's the challenge, isn't it? We don't want to say to people, you have to have this because it's the right, because we're saying you have to have it. Actually, you want them to come on board because they see it is the right thing to do, but also it's good for everybody. And I think there's definitely if we're talking specifically on the sports side, there's an element of people feeling the pie's only so big, and if we give women more sports coverage, or we give it more funding, or we give it more investment, there's less for the men's sport that I truly love. And why am I paying my Sky subscription if I don't get to just watch more men's football? I don't want the women's football, is an example that I hear a lot. But actually, it's explained to people that it is good for everybody, that it's good, that it will benefit for them in the long term. So that may be that it's a financial benefit, but actually equality benefits all people. It isn't just the smaller party that get more from it, or those that have been deprived of it for so long. And that's the other piece, I think, that people are becoming more aware of too. But there's a reason women's sport has had less audiences and has had less visibility, because it hasn't had the investment that men's sport has had for hundreds of years, 150 years or so. So there is definitely that redressing the balance, and that can be, I think, uncomfortable for people. So success of the Euros, and if it was talk specifically football, and the World Cup, and Arsenal at the Emirates having packed stadia, we can suddenly overturn these arguments of no one's interested in women's football, the skill's not there, the audience is not there. Clearly, we can see that it is now, and I think that it's demonstrating that it is as good, if not in some cases, more entertaining to watch than some men's sport. But we don't need everyone. Everyone doesn't have to love all of sport.
No.
We don't have to love all of women's sport. It's just giving women an opportunity, the same opportunity. And in some cases, it's not about equality, it's about equity. So it's investing a bit more in the women's game, or women's sport, because it hasn't had that investment. It's been deprived of it for so long.
Absolutely.